I'd like to explain why I think we, if we win, as I think we're going to, we're likely to win completely. I would like to prevail 100%. So not just 50%, not just nearly there, but 100%. And this relies on the idea of what I would call feedback loops, particularly feedback loops as they apply to ethnic separation, i.e. the more we do something, the more we're likely to do something. And I think they will pretty much guarantee that that ethnic separation happens very much. I would say at 100%, and that means we're likely to win 100% as well. I don't think I've contributed much in the way of original ideas. I think that the two things that I've contributed are, firstly, the idea that law is not something that we submit ourselves to reluctantly. Law is something that it's a primal human need, a basic need that we will rush to be able to submit ourselves to law in order to be able to get safety out of it as well, and in order to be able to show that we are trustworthy, that we are safe, and that we can be trusted. And the second thing is this idea of feedback loops. Again, I don't think feedback loops are not original, but feedback loops applying to the issue of ethnic separation, I think, so far as I'm aware, that is. And that is my view, that once the state goes away and we have to rely on our own individual decisions for our own safety, on our own hard-headed, rational decisions, and once we have the principle of freedom of association and freedom of non-association in place, then what you'll see is a snowballing effect of ethnic separation. Ethnic separation will start, it will start fast and hard, and the more it happens, the more it will happen, until it is pretty much 100% complete. And I think that means that we will win completely, and we will accomplish 100% remigration. Now, I'd like to, in a second, I'd like to begin by outlining the problem. Give me a moment. Now, the problem, or the question, is whether remigration is going to happen and how much it will happen if it does. On the one hand, you have this fellow Pete North. I'm not picking on him. He just gives an example. So someone has said, I have nothing to say other than that I want mass deportations. And Pete North says, not happening, so what's plan B? So he dismisses it out of hand. It's not going to happen. He could be right. Well, is he right? And then you have, on the other hand, the phrase "every single one." If you put that into Twitter, you'll find that, and you get all kinds of people saying the opposite. You have this Wolf saying they all have to go back, every single one. Remigration Ruby, I quite like her. Remigration means every single one, not just the ones you don't like, all of them. And then down here is Steve Laws. Remove them all by any means necessary. They don't belong in our homelands. Total remigration, every single one. And the question is, who is right? Now, looking at how passive we are and how we don't seem to care, you could be forgiven for thinking, we'll never get around to it. We'll never make a decision that's that ethnocentric. Well, and you could be, or you would be even more depressed if you saw this little clip from Nick Fuentes, where what he's saying is, I'd rather live in a diverse city, so Chicago, rather than a boring monocultural white city like Kansas. There he's talking to Richard Spencer. I think Richard Spencer lives in Kansas, and Nick Fuentes is in Chicago, and he's saying, I'd much rather live in Chicago. And Richard Spencer says to him, yeah, I can see you'd soon get bored if you had to live in a monocultural area like Kansas. So if Nick Fuentes, the beast of the right wing, if he's saying he prefers a bit of diversity, then surely we're never going to accomplish total remigration. There'll be too many of us saying, I want a bit of diversity, I don't feel strongly enough about it to pay the money to have to get people to go. Now, I side with the every single one side of this argument. I think it will happen. I think Nick Fuentes, if he lived in Britain or in Europe, I think he would end up opting for the monocultural area, and I'll explain why. I think it's going to happen, and I think it will be done, and certainly can be done peacefully if we want easily, without bloodshed, with people going voluntarily, consensually, deciding that they want to go. And that might seem crazy. Let me explain why I think that's likely to happen. If I go here, hold on, there. Now, this lady, Catherine Blakelock, she summarised my what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying there. That's the collapse solution. It's a little bit wordy, but this lady, Catherine Blakelock, she summarised it well, and she called it interesting as well. That was very nice. Thank you, Catherine. So we're not going to vote our way out. Finance will collapse, so the economy will collapse, and government will go broke, and social security will collapse. That will lead to violence and disorder, and that disorder, that breakdown of state authority, will lead to ethnic segregation. And then those ethnic areas cut off from the white population, cut off from the welfare state, there's no welfare state, and then cut off also from sources of employment amongst white people. They are likely to they are likely to become unlivable fast. They'll collapse, and the people living in them will be amenable to a free plane ticket home. That's basically what I'm saying. She misses out the bit about law. So once the state has collapsed, if the state collapses, the state can't provide law anymore. So the state's gone. It can't do anything. It can't provide you with law. We will have to meet our need for law individually from each other by collectivizing individually, by coming together as equals, as effectively as citizens, without the state. And what I'm saying there, this is number 5. We will seek protection of the law via self-governing legal charters or codes that you join voluntarily, like a club, where each member agrees he can be punished if he doesn't treat other members according to the rules, i.e. the law. So it's law that you vote for with your feet, and not with the ballot. So the point I'm making there is, if the state breaks down, we have to have law in order to be able to keep ourselves safe, in order to be able to continue to trade, to be prosperous. And we will do it by just entering into legal codes, like entering into a Skittles club. Except this is, instead of having a club where you play Skittles, it's a club where you get the law. The law is imposed on you and everyone else in it. You each have to treat each other in the same way. That's the kind of law we will have. I don't think it'll be that much different from what we've got now, but I think that's what we're going to get if the state breaks down, as I think is unavoidable. And if that happens, I think those the feedback loops will kick in, and independence upon 2 conditions. Firstly, that you have to rely on your own individual decisions. You have to rely on yourself, your own choices for your security, and what you choose that has a direct, total effect on what happens to you. You suffer the consequences because it's a private transaction. It's not something that you do by vote, where your vote is diluted out a million times. And secondly, the second factor is complete freedom of non-association. Freedom to say, I want to associate with these people, I don't want to associate with these people, which would allow English people to say, I want to live in a system and an area that only contains English people and doesn't allow non-English people to join or to live in this area. Now, I think if that happens, I think that's likely to happen anyway. The ethnic separation will be organic amongst all populations, and the more it happens, the more it will happen. And that is the essence of the feedback loops. But there are a couple of things I'd like to talk about, additional factors which I think set the scene, on top of which those feedback loops will operate. And one is how if you get a breakdown in the state authority, that will lead to a very fast and immediate hard ethnocentrism amongst all populations. And secondly, that people act rationally, hard-headedly, much more shrewdly and calculatedly when they are making basically a market choice, when they're deciding for themselves are making a decision about their lives for themselves as individuals than when they vote for them, voting along with tens of millions of other people. And I want to deal with these in turn. If I deal firstly with what happens with the breakdown of state authority, I'm relying here on two examples. One from the London riots of 2011, and secondly, the Ballymena disturbances earlier this year. So if I can deal firstly with the London riots, what you found is that what you found with those London riots was there was a lot of looting going on, and local populations grouped together in order to defend their homes, their businesses, or places of worship, and they did it on, I think, quite a hard line, exclusive, ethnocentric basis. Really, it wasn't. I'm not aware that they were saying that Sikhs were saying to white people, "You can't help to defend our temple," and I'm not aware that white people were saying to Hindus or Sikhs, "You can't defend our areas." It was just that was the way it shook out. People clubbed together on strict, exclusive, ethnocentric lines. And I want to deal with a bit of the reporting from because it illustrates that. So if I deal firstly with this one, this is about the Turks. So the Turks, I mean, you would think it would just be Muslims gathering together. No, there are 57 varieties within each of the 57 varieties. So this one from Al Jazeera: Turks police own London district amid rioting. Turkish shopkeepers in East London neighbourhood refused to close, stand up to rioters and guard the streets. So that was Turks defending Turks. So the Turks clubbing together on a pretty exclusive basis. And there's this quote: our local shopkeepers refused to close. He said, "We are Turkish," as explanation. So they won't close, and the explanation for not closing is, "We're Turkish." Okay, that is how ethnocentric they were. Okay, so and they weren't saying, "Well, diversity is our greatest strength, and therefore that strength enables us to keep our shops open." They said, "We're exclusively Turkish," said one post. Another added, "Reports of heroic scenes on Dalston High Street, Turkish families lining the streets to oppose riots." What great London as well. Another along similar lines read, "Upper Dalston looks busier than a Saturday night with all the Turks on patrol. Thanks for keeping Dalston safe," followed by, "Who needs riot police when you've got Turkish shop owners?" So that's Turks defending Turks. So again, very ethnocentric. State goes down, diversity goes out of the window, and you rely for your safety. You rely on the people you know you can trust, and the people you know you can trust are the people who look, think, act, and speak like you do. You know you can deal with them. You know how they will react, so you know you can depend on them. You can rely on them to react in certain ways, and that means you can entrust your safety. You can pool your safety with them, and that's why that ethnocentrism kicks in hard when the state goes away and people are vulnerable to crime. So that's the Turks. And the second one is Sikhs, and that's this one from SikhNet. I'll give you the Southall Sikhs defy anarchy of London riots. A combination of text messages and phone calls and social media postings and good old word of mouth, etc., drew together crowds of, drew together crowds of Sikhs in the hundreds to protect the Gurdwaras, businesses and locals against the very real threat of mob opportunism from surrounding areas. Okay, and then further down there's a quote there. "Why shouldn't we defend our homes, businesses and places of worship? This is our area." This is the Sikhs speaking. "This is our area. There's lots of talk about kicking off here, but we're ready for them." And then, interestingly, interactions with the police were highly positive. One officer commenting, "We are right behind you," to a group of Sikhs on Broadway, with some police teams seen patrolling together with other groups. Another confirmed, "We are not expecting any trouble here tonight. The community is very strong here." So that's the community means the Sikh community. That's Sikhs talking about themselves. And then, so if you go on further, hold on. There again, London, hold on, London riots, armed Sikhs protect Gurdwaras. And local vigilante groups have been formed in various areas of London to protect homes and businesses, establishments that have been vandalised by rioters, mainly of Afro-Caribbean in origin in London over the last few days. That's the Economic Times of India. That's what they're saying. So they're not only talking about Sikhs banding together, they're identifying the looters on an ethnocentric basis. I think there were shamefully, quite a lot of white people involved in those riots as well. But this is how it separates out under those conditions. And the next one there, this is Jewish Guardians keep London streets safe. And hold on, if I go down here, bear with me, I'll just find the part. Okay, so the headline here from Ynet News, I think that's a Jewish organisation. Jewish Guardians keep London streets safe as riots escalate with police caught unprepared. Jewish volunteers take to northwest London streets to defend their neighbourhoods. And then one of the guys leading it said, "We decided to go out and show our presence in the streets." The chief executive of Shomrim, Northwest London, Gary Ost, told Ynet, "We realise that people start riots when there is no police presence on the scene, and then it's hard to control them. So we wanted to stop it in the Jewish neighbourhood before it gets started." So that's Jews protecting Jewish areas and other Jews. Again, ethnocentric. The ethnocentricity kicks in immediately and hard. And the next one here, this is Muslims. Now this one, Muslims tackle, Al Jazeera again, Muslims tackle looters and bigots. Okay, so that's a British Muslims' reaction to the riot should dispel any continued demonisation in the media. Okay, that's your standard Al Jazeera. But what I found interesting is this quote, a Muslim student, "When accused of terrorism, we are Muslims. When killed by looters, we become Asian." So there's the self-pity there. So a Muslim student explained to me. He was commenting on the media reporting the death of 3 young Muslims in Birmingham on Tuesday night. Like many other Muslims, they were bravely defending shops and communities as rioters went on the rampage, etc., etc. So again, you see from that quote that you're getting this heightened, quite intense sense of their own in-group preference, their own ethnocentricity. You demonize us as Muslims when we do something bad, but when we get killed, when we're victims, you call us Asians. So, but basically, he knows who he's talking about. They're talking about themselves. Now, the next one, this is and eventually, about a couple of days, 2, maybe 3 days after Sikhs and Muslims and Jews had got up their own patrols, white people started to do so in places like Eltham. And so what you have is Londoners vowed to defend themselves against rioters. That's Reuters. And there's a quote here. I'll read this. One website, Casuals United, and that's football fans, I think football hooligans, I'm not certain though, I don't want to slander them, which says it represents firms, the lads who had to form into military units in order to travel to football matches, said soccer fans had formed groups on Tuesday night in Enfield, North London, the scene of trouble earlier in the week. Well done all the football lads who mobbed up to protect their areas and innocent people's property last night. The website said, "You know things are bad when football crowds have to police the streets." Videos posted on YouTube showed a large number of prominently white men reportedly walking through Enfield chanting, "England, England." So again, that ethnocentricity kicked in. It took longer to do with us, the English, but it kicked in. And it seems to have kicked in pretty hard, I think. That's Casuals United patrolling the streets, white youths, white people shouting "England, England," and again, and just at that point, just when the white man starts to collectivise, starts to get together, the BBC come out and the Metropolitan Police come out and say the London riots, residents cautioned over vigilantism, just as white London starts to protect itself. The Metropolitan Police has warned Londoners against forming vigilante patrol groups. Well, they were right behind the Sikhs. That was a quote. So anyway, so maybe I'm digressing. The point is, I want to show that there is a background of hard ethnocentrism that kicks in once the state falls over and people are exposed to the dangers of crime. And crime mushrooms when the state falls over. Now, the second example I wanted to look at is the Ballymena disturbances, where what you had was Romany gypsies sexually assaulted or raped or attempted to rape a young girl. And so the people of Ballymena said, right, we want those Romany gypsies out of our neighbourhood. And I think they succeeded. I think they were successful. I don't know if that's going to be reversed, if it has been partially reversed. But my point is not whether it was successful. My point is that it happened and how hardline it was. So if I go here onto this news story, it began with basically Bulgarian national. That meant Romany gypsies. Bulgarian nationals scared to go out in Ballymena. A Bulgarian woman who's lived in Ballymena for 9 years says she worries her home could be broken into amid the unrest because Ballymena people were going door to door saying, we want you to go and you better do so. And then, and after a while, the more it happened, the more it happened. Then it progressed to Filipinos. Filipinos were putting up signs saying, Filipinos live here, so don't tell us to go. Don't smash our windows, or don't threaten to set our car on fire. And then it happened with Filipinos. Let me find the spot. Hold on. That's it. So these people whose house was attacked last night, and they were evacuated by Ballymena Baptist Church and now living in a caravan in Kiribati near Ballymena, so not in Ballymena. So then they moved on and the Filipinos went. I think this shows the ethnocentrism of the Ballymena people. And it got quite hard line. That wasn't an accident. My children are frightened to go outside. Filipino mechanic's home targeted after Ballymena riots. There he is, his car's been set on fire. I'm guessing they said, we want you to go. And then he set his car on fire to make him go. And I think that gentleman might have gone, actually, but though I'm not certain about that. I think those methods were effective. And it didn't stop there. You have this one from The Guardian, where it's talking about 14 years in Ballymena, never anything like this. What caught my eye, I've dealt with this before, it then eventually went to other Eastern Europeans. A Slovak family had their windows smashed. So the Slovak, I don't think they were Slovak gypsies. The previous occupants were a nightmare, but the Slovaks were brilliant and should not have been targeted. They got hit in the heat of the moment. Well, it was a mistake. Those responsible had apologised. I think it snowballed, and then afterwards, when it calmed down, they probably apologised. But what my point is, that that ethnocentricity, it gathers pace, it snowballs and becomes really hard line. So it might have started by being against Romany gypsies. It didn't end there. It moved on to other populations. They're basically saying, this is our area, we want it for ourselves. That's what the people of Ballymena were saying, I think. Now, the other part of the background, I think, is the differences in the way people behave when they're voting, one amongst millions or tens of millions, and the way people behave when they're making an individual decision about their own lives. Now, this has been observed by quite a few studies. Basically, what's been observed is that people act much more rationally, much more hard-headedly, soberly, and in a calculated way when they just make decisions as individuals. They buy things or join things or do things for their lives as individuals, rather than when they vote for them. Because when you vote for something, your vote probably has zero effect on the outcome for you, because it's diluted by millions of other voters. So all kinds of other considerations, more immediate considerations for you, kick in. And this is sometimes been called expressive voting, which is usually virtue signalling conformity or polishing your self-image or showing that you belong, as perhaps a sense of belonging, and all these the kind of considerations which cause people to vote or not to vote against diversity, to go along with the universalism or diversity's universalism, which is also an element of the welfare state, which we do like to vote for, the universal welfare state. Now, I've noticed this in my job, my day job, amongst environmental campaigners. They love to say that things should be decided by the vote democratically, because then they can get people to spout a whole lot of sentimental nonsense about global warming, say, and they can get people to act in an idealistic, unrealistic way. Whereas if people simply make decisions about their own lives as individuals, they will act in a very hard-headed, rational, clear-sighted way. And that's acting for yourself as an individual. That's sometimes called a market decision. It doesn't always involve money, but the point is it imposes direct, tangible costs that encourage realistic choices. And the difference has sometimes been described as the difference between cheering on a football team. You know that cheering the football team is probably not going to make the football team win. It's not going to make the crosses or the shots any better, but you still do it because you feel good. You show that you're part of the crowd. You show which team you're supporting. You're showing loyalty. You're out with your mates. It feels good to do it, even though it doesn't have much effect on what's going on the pitch. And so cheering on the football team versus buying a car. When you buy a car, you basically you want value for money. You want a car that serves your needs effectively. It's about, and it does, and your decision is not diluted. You're not making a mass decision with a collective decision with tens of millions of other people about which car to buy. You're making a decision about your car for you, and you will do it in a much more realistic, hard-headed way in general. Now, feedback loops. This is the thing that I think, what I've explained so far is why I think there will be a lot of ethnocentric behaviour if the state falls over. But what I'm saying here is why it's likely to be complete, 100%. It will go right to the wall, in my view. And I think people like Nick Fuentes, if he lived in Britain, if he was an English person, why he would say, actually, I don't want to live in a diverse area. I want to go and live in an English-only area. He would end up doing that, even though he's saying he'd prefer to live in the diverse area of Chicago. And the best way the best way to illustrate this, I think, is with a nerdy spreadsheet. So what I'll do is I'll just show you that spreadsheet. What I'm doing there is what I'm saying is, if I just explain it, suppose you get the state falling over, different groups, ethnic groups separate out. And let's suppose only 50% of English people say, I want to live in an English-only area, in an English-only system that doesn't allow non-English people in it. Suppose it's only, I think it'll be 80%. I think it'll follow the 80-20 rule, because most things do, usually 75-25, something like that. But let's be conservative about it. Let's say it'll be 50%, so only 50%. So fully 50% of English people say, wow, diversity really is something I like. It's our greatest strength. I want to live in a diverse area. Let's suppose that. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that no ordinary person, no working person, no battler, no poor person says diversity is our greatest strength. People who say that are people who have enough money to live away from diversity. So actually, I don't think there's any way that 50% of the population will be so keen on diversity that they actually do go and decide to live amongst it if the state falls over. But let's look at what happens if it is 50%. Okay, and I've done a little spreadsheet here. So if you imagine, let's say that's 65, that's year one there. So imagine the state, let's say the state breaks down in 5 years' time, and the sort of white British or the English population is 65%, and the foreign population of all the very different varieties, so Sikhs, Hindus, Shia, Sunni, Africans, Afro-Caribbeans, etc., they all form 35%. Now let's say 50% of those, so 65 out of every 100 is English. Now let's say half of those say, yeah, I'm happy, I want to live in the diverse area. I love diversity, I love curry, and it is our greatest strength, so I'm going to live in the diverse area. 50% of those English people will leave. They'll leave for the English-only area, English-only system that's exclusive. What then happens? What you then find, and this is the feedback loop, this is the essence of it, then again, the number of English people in that sample then is no longer 65, it's then 32 and a half. But the foreign number stays the same at 35. So the English, the white English population goes from 65% to 48%. Now 48%, let's say rounded up, let's be conservative, that's 50-50. So one English person for one foreigner. That actually doesn't feel like one against one. That feels like one English person for two foreigners. Because imagine you live in a terrace street, and you're an English person, you live in a terrace street. If it's equal numbers, the chances are that the person, the household to the right of you and the household to the left of you, they are both foreigner owned. And so you then, it feels like 2 to 1, not 1 to 1. So, and if that happens, you will get, I think 50% again will say, hold on, I didn't mind it when we were a majority, even if it was not that big a majority, 65%. Now that we're we're in the minority, and I've got diversity on either side of me in my street, I don't think I like this. That's too much diversity for me. And remember, this is probably in very ethnocentric times, because the state has broken down. They're likely to get victimized. There'll be horror stories going around. And if they've got children, I think half of them will again say, actually, this is too much diversity for me. I'm going to go. So what happens then is the English population halves again. So instead of, it was 65, then it was 32 and a half, then it's 16.25, so about 16 as against 35. That basically means that that's 31% English. So, or to put it in another way, for every one English person, there's 2.15 foreigners. And again, it doesn't feel like 1 to 2, it feels like 1 to 4, because if you take the example of the terraced house, or sitting on the tube, or sitting on a bus, for every English person has 2 foreigners on one side, 2 foreigners on the other side. That feels like 4 to 1. And I think in those circumstances, you will get another 50% within a couple of weeks, a few weeks. I think another 50% will say, actually, this is too much. We're just a very substantial or a small minority here. We only make up 31%. And that's just too much diversity. We're getting victimized. I don't want it. And then half leave again. And then it's, whereas it started out as 65, now it's only 8 or 18.84% of the total. So that's one English person for every 4.3 foreigners. Again and again, take that example of the terrace street again, so that if you live in your own English household, 4 neighbours to your right are foreigners, 4 neighbours to your left are foreigners, and then beyond that there's another English household. So again, so half of those remaining hardline multiculturalists will go. That's the way the feedback loops work. The more it happens, the more the incentive to do it more will occur. Now, so that I think is quite a slow feedback loop. What I did down here, further down. So that's assuming that the split is 50-50, that fully 50% at each stage of the English population are content to live in their ever more diverse area. I don't think it'll be that way. I think it'll be 80-20. That 80% of English people will say, actually, I'd much rather, if I have the chance to live in an exclusive English area, I will do so. So what you would have is immediately, again, day one, it's 65 English people to 35 foreign people out of every 100. Suddenly 80% go and join the exclusive English area. You're left with just 13. So 1/5 of 65 is 13. So 13 English people as against 35 foreigners. So immediately, what that means is, whereas you had two English, right at day one, two English people for every one foreigner, now it's nearly three foreigners, 2.69 foreigners for every one English person. And then suppose people say, hold on, that's far too much, and 80% of the remaining English people leave and go for the exclusive English area, then it's one English person for 13.46 foreigners. That's way a tiny minority then. And more will leave. And if 80% leave again, it's 1 to 67, 1 to 336. Do you understand? So that is how the feedback loops work. Once that ethnocentrism starts, the populations separate out, and living amongst a different population, living amongst diversity, becomes much more unpleasant than it is now. You can't escape. Your money won't be enough to help you escape it, because there'll be the ratios will be so much heavier. You just won't be able to get away from it, and you'll be hugely outnumbered by it. So doesn't that will overpower your sentimental self-image needs, your self-righteous virtue signalling about diversity. And you'll find an excuse to say, well, this isn't diversity anymore. I love diversity, but now it's not diverse. These diverse areas are not true diversity, so I'm going to leave. And I think I'm going to join the evil English white area in order to change it from the inside. So I'll join it because I'm so idealistic. I'm going to change it, and those people will quietly scuttle into the English area. I hope getting thoroughly embarrassed. So that is my point. There is no logical stopping point to where those feedback loops work, because the more they work, the harsher the harsher the pressure for people to separate out. So the more they work, the more powerful those feedback loops become, and the more we will separate out. And this is why I think that we are much more likely to win if the state collapses, if the state goes away. This is why I think that breakdown is in fact the answer. It will seem like we've lost. I think the likes of David Starkey or Peter Hitchens will think, my goodness, states collapse, that's the end of it all. I think that will be the beginning of when we win. I think it'll happen pretty fast after that, as long as we, the English, are able to get up law fast. So what I'll be doing is touting around a legal system that people can join. That you can join that legal system. You basically pay your subs and you join it, and you have to obey the rules. You have to treat everyone else in the club according to the rules, and they do the same towards you. It's quite simple, but it's not something that's imposed on you by the state. It's something you join voluntarily in order to be able to continue to trade and to be safe and prosperous. And so that is why I think collapse, or that's why I go for what I call my collapse solution, which is the one I have here. So the collapse solution: the economy breaks down, the welfare state breaks down, state authority breaks down, crime and disorder explode. Then we will seek protection of the law, as I've said, by basically private means, through like joining a club. And then complete freedom of association and non-association means that we rely upon each other, and that means we separate out hard along ethnic lines. And then foreign enclaves, the conditions in those foreign enclaves, separated out, voluntarily separated out. We won't have to force them. It's not about stuffing people into ghettos. They would do it to themselves, like they did in the London riots of 2011. You'll get all of Sikh areas, Hindu areas, Shia, Sunni areas, Afro-Caribbean, African areas, all of them. They will self-segregate hard. But then what I think they will find is that once they're cut off from the productive English, they're cut off from the welfare state, they're cut off from essential services, amenity services, then I think conditions in their areas will plummet fast, and then they'll become unlivable, and then they will be amenable to a free plane ticket home. We won't have to do any persecuting. The most we'll have to do is to stand back and let them stew in their own juice. So that's why I think that state breakdown is the thing that is likely. It's much more likely than politics, than voting, than state activity to accomplish remigration. And if it does, I think it will do it completely. If it starts, it will continue and continue. It will snowball because of those feedback loops until it occurs naturally, pretty much 100%, apart from perhaps a few suicidally diversity addicted nutters. And, and that is because the state can make hard, harsh decisions, tough decisions. It can do that if it's pushed. Query whether that will happen under the democratic vote. I don't think so, because what we focus on is welfare. That's the thing we want the state to provide us, not so far remigration. But the state can make tough decisions. What the state is very bad at is making fine-grained decisions on an individual basis, which is what's required if you're sifting through populations. If the state goes down and people have to make those individual decisions that their lives depend on, then that is a very good way to make those tough decisions, but at a fine-grained level. And that's why I think that the breakdown of the state is the way that we will we will solve this problem. And I think if we do, I think we will solve it completely, 100%. Thank you.